Yo. All right, so for starters, I want to thank everybody who has supported the podcast, everybody who's listened, everybody who's shared, and everybody who's actually been able to gain something from it. It has had a lot of positive impact on my personal life, professional life, as well as a lot of people that are really close to me have changed their view on certain conversations that normally they just wouldn't be willing to have. So thank you guys. Continue to do the work, and I'll make sure that I also continue to do the work. Obviously, I know this is not our usual setup. This is just me by myself, and I felt it very impactful and important for me to talk about 10 things that are truths or hard pills to swallow that I learned throughout the year. And obviously, these are very individual to me. I feel like it'd be useful for anybody who is listening to be able to take what I'm doing and use it and apply it to your own life. So creating your own list of 10 things that you may have learned or hard pills to swallow, it can be very beneficial and really get you set up for the new year. Now, obviously, this is by any means a New Year's resolution, but it's more so just recollection, just looking at the year as a whole. So I'll go ahead and get started. The first of the 10 is sometimes you just do not have the capacity to give people what they need and vice versa. What that means is you literally just don't have the capacity sometimes. Sometimes you don't have within you what you need to give a person, and sometimes people don't have in them what they need to give you, and that can be in the term of them doing everything that they can, giving their all, putting every single foot forward, everything that they have, draining their cup completely empty, and that could still not be enough for you. And vice versa, you could be doing everything that you can to get whatever it is that you're trying to get out of a person or give into a person, and that not be enough. Capacity is something that is not easy to measure, but when you feel like you're giving 100%, 110%, and that's still not being enough, sometimes you just may not have what it is that person needs. And sometimes coming to a realization that being okay is something that, can be very useful moving forward. So that's definitely the first one. Second one is love should always start with you first. And I'm still coming to terms with that one. That one is something that's really difficult for me to understand, just because I've always been super hyper fixated on giving out as much love as possible, but also not understanding that I don't necessarily love myself. Sometimes I struggle with my physical appearance, or sometimes I struggle with my inability to do certain things. And a lot of that just comes with compassion, self-compassion. You have to be able to love you to some capacity, in some way, shape, form, or fashion. If you are void of any love towards yourself, then it'll be really difficult for you to be able to adequately administer love to someone else. So love has to start with you first. That's the second. The third one is no one is responsible for your happiness, and vice versa. You are not responsible for anyone else's happiness. If you feel that your presence or your actions are the only thing that can make a person happy, then you just need to step away from whatever situation that is. And if you feel like you are in a situation where there's one singular person that makes you happy, and if they are not in your presence, then you will not be happy, then you have a lot of soul searching, a lot of internal, introspective work that needs to be done, because that's way too much responsibility for any one person to bear. Someone else's positive or negative emotions being your sole responsibility is something really difficult to handle. It's a lot of weight on shoulders that are not built to handle them. regardless of who you may think you are. That is something that will eventually get you to crumble. So coming to the understanding that your responsibility is for your happiness, your joy, solely, because you're the only person that you're going to be around 100% of the time. Nobody else is going to be in your presence all of the time. So understanding that you have to be your happiness provider is important. The next one, number 4, is your trauma is not an excuse for the way that you are. Obviously, traumatic experiences are horrible. They are things that no one can account for, no one can plan for, no one ever wants to happen. But once we come to an understanding, this is a traumatic experience that I went through, whether it be in childhood or even in adulthood, because trauma is something that can happen at any time. Your actions are not an excuse for the way that you treat someone, not an excuse for the way that you talk to someone, not an excuse for your insecurities, not an excuse for whatever actions you may take that aren't necessarily intentional. And this is something that I'm learning. I have a lot of trauma, childhood trauma, adult trauma, adolescent trauma, whatever the case may be. And I definitely have been guilty of doing things or saying things or being a specific way with trauma being the excuse. It's not an excuse. It's a reason, but it's not an excuse. It's inexcusable. You have to do the work. You have to come to terms with this. Whatever the trauma is, whether it be physical trauma, sexual trauma, whatever type of trauma it is, you have to first come to terms with the fact that that's something that you experienced, then come to terms with the fact that it is trauma, and then figure out how you're going to work through it. What steps do I need to take so that this doesn't affect me on a daily basis or affect my professional, or personal life anymore. And just to preface before we continue, I'm not saying any of these things with some type of omnipotent power over them. I'm not a perfect person. I don't do these things 100% of the time, but something that I am doing is trying to do my best. Even if my best is just getting out of bed in the morning, doing my best is my focus every single day. So moving on. The next one is healing has an ellipses after it. An ellipses is ... That means that it continues. It's not, you're never going to get to a point where you are healed, because life does not stop. Life does not pause for you. There are things that are going to harm you, going to cause you discomfort, going to cause you some sense of pain. And the main thing that you can do is understand that you will always be healing from something. So this ideology that people have behind don't do certain things until you're healed, you're never going to be healed. You can be in a better place from something that may have damaged you, but being healed, being a healed person, is not real. It's not a thing. So healing has an ellipses. That's number 5. Number 6, and this is something that I'm continuously reminded of, and I feel like the first time I was reminded of it was when mortality was really tossed into my face within the last 3 to 4 years. Everyone is human. There's not one single person that is perfect. Dehumanizing people makes it difficult for you to humanize yourself. And as a Black individual, we are conditioned to dehumanize ourselves in ways that put us in a situation where we think that we can do it all, overworking ourselves or going with little to no sleep. For whatever reason, it's associated with dehumanization. Everyone is human. Nobody is better than any other individual. You may have made better decisions, you may have made better choices, but you're not better than them because of those choices. We are all human beings. This is everybody's first time living this life. So, and this is something that, if you've listened to previous episodes, has been mentioned by guests or by myself. So that's something that I try to remember whenever I get upset about something, whenever I get frustrated with something that someone may have said or something that I may have wanted them to say. That's something that I try to keep in my mind, keep in my brain, moving forward and just navigating life in general. Everyone is human. That's number 6. Number 7, and this one's kind of associated with number 6, is everyone, including me, has contributed to someone else's trauma. This is something that was a really hard pill for me to swallow, but I feel like it's necessary for healing, for being able to love myself and forgive myself for certain things. You are, and without knowing, sometimes that's the case because it's really hard to talk about traumatic situations, especially with someone who may have traumatized you. But you are responsible for someone else's displeasure, someone else's trauma, or someone else's diluted quality of life. That is something that you have to really dive deep into to be able to forgive yourself for things that you may be unconsciously punishing yourself for. I definitely have done a lot of introspection within the last couple of years and understood that I may have caused somebody some trauma within trying to navigate through my own, without knowing that that's what I was doing. And that's not something that is excusable, but you have to forgive yourself for it. And I'm working on forgiving myself for those things. Now, some of you may be asking or wondering whether or not, if you are the responsible for someone else's trauma, then why not approach them? The problem with that, and sometimes it's better for you to wait for them to approach you, because sometimes you can re-trigger a person that you may have traumatized, and being able to firstly forgive yourself and then have the space open for that person to approach you with whatever issue it is. Now, this does not mean that a person can walk into your life that you may have traumatized and just start slandering you or attacking you verbally or physically or whatever the case may be. They have to come at it with a scope of, we need to get through this. If it's worth salvaging, if whatever type of problem that I have needs to be conversed about, then that's something that needs to come from them from a place of reconciliation, not revenge, vengeance, or whatever the case may be. It's a choice, but it's a choice that the traumatized should be able to make. For you as an individual, it's best, and obviously I'm not giving you necessarily your roadmap to having this conversation with yourself, but this is just the way that I work through this specific truth, coming to terms with the fact that, okay, I most likely was responsible for traumatizing this specific individual. Let me really dive deep into why I responded that way, or why I acted that way, or why I may have, came at them in the way that I did. And then the next thing that you can do is really go into trying to figure out, okay, now what? What do I do with this information? Therapy is something that we as a community don't utilize enough. I didn't really even start seeing a therapist myself until I was like 22, 21. At that point, I had already experienced way too much loss, way too much grief, way too much trauma, and I was just backpedaling, trying to figure out a way. So getting into therapy sooner rather than later is something that's gonna help you navigate things that you've never even contemplated able to be navigated. So that's definitely number 7. Number 8, and this one's a big one. You are one decision away from being in the same situation as someone you may look down on. So think about it. Somebody that you're driving down the street and you see a homeless guy or homeless woman and they're just dirty, and you just pity them. Why don't you have a job? Why don't you? These are things that you have no idea what their life experience is, and look back on your life. One decision will put you in the same exact shoes as that person. Whether or not you know it, all you have to do is make one different decision within your life, and you can be in the exact same shoes as someone else that you may look down on, someone else that you may think that you're better than, someone else that may have made an unfavorable decision and you look down on them for that unfavorable decision. All you have to do is make the same exact decision, and you are in the same exact shoes as that person. That is something that is part of the humanization and part of being able to open up yourself to certain things. This one thing that I'm not going to say never. One thing that I'm working on, trying not to do, is making grandiose statements about myself. Or I'm a kind person, I'm really generous, I'm patient, I'm this, I'm that. Because then you limit your character. You limit the possibility for something else. So in the moment that you are not patient, or the moment that you are not generous, or the moment that you are not forgiving, or the moment that you are not kind or calm, if you have been, very vocal to other people about things that you feel like fall in line with who you are, it makes it really difficult for you and for them to really accept it. You're usually always calm. Why are you not right now? It's part of the human experience. You have to be open to different parts of your character. And if you don't like them, then you have to work on making the parts that you do like more constant. But no one is an overall grandiose, okay, you were always this, you were always that. The only things that you are always are things that are biologically unable to be changed. And we don't have to get into the conversation within that, but it's just difficult for you to have different possibilities when you stamp yourself as one thing. So going back to the original truth, it helps you be able to not forget more and forgive more, because I feel like it's just really important to be able to see other people as people. No one is any less of a person than I am just because I have, a laptop or a car or a house or whatever the case may be. That person that I drove past on Prospect the other day is just as much of a human as I am. And I can be in their shoes in the future if I don't make the right decisions. So understanding that is something that I try to walk with, and I try to not be as judgmental to other humans, just having a human experience. Number 9, and this is something that is really difficult for me, especially around the holiday time right now. Life ends. That's number 9. Life ends. I lost my grandmother this year. I lost a lot of good friends. I lost a lot of good family members. And that is something that's tough. It's really close to the holiday season, and this is my first holiday, my family's first holiday without my grandmother. That is something that's really difficult for me to understand, but understanding that life is one thing that cannot last forever. It's going to end. That is a hard truth. That is probably the biggest pill to swallow throughout these 10, because it's something that's in my face, especially as of now. We're a couple of days away from a holiday that's based off of community. I don't necessarily celebrate Thanksgiving for its traditional purposes. Colonization is not something to celebrate, but family and togetherness is, and that is the focus. And I'm trying my best to not succumb to negative emotions, but also acknowledge that they exist, acknowledge that I feel negatively about something, and that is my focus for this holiday season, is being present, being in the moment, and enjoying being around people that I know one day will not be here. So that's my focus, and that's something that was a hard truth, and is a hard truth, and will continue to be a hard truth for me to swallow. And grief is something that we all navigate differently, but understanding certain things can kind of make it a little less painful, at least in my experience. And number 10, last one, is no matter what choice you make, someone will be unhappy. So choose you first. Choosing to make you happy before making anyone else happy will resolve a lot of internal conflict as well as external conflict. have to understand, and this is me talking to myself, that the most important person in your life is you. Without you, the rest of your life story does not exist. And it does not matter if it's child, parent, a grandparent, a significant other. All of those people are only important to you if you exist. So you have to be at the optimal level of operation. You have to make decisions that put you closer to 100% as often as possible. And I don't mean this in a way of selfishness or doing things that negatively affect other people intentionally. It's more so of understanding that if you want to go back to school, but other people don't necessarily like that you are going back to school, do it. If you want to work a different kind of job, but other people don't necessarily like that you work that job, do it. If you have a dream that you want to chase, but other people are telling you that you're going to struggle or that they don't like that you're associated with whatever that is, do it. If you want to do something to your body, a tattoo, augmentation, anything of that nature, that only affects you. So do it if it makes you happy. That is something that I have had struggles with. I've quit certain things. I've not done certain things because I knew that somebody would be unhappy if I did it. That is not important. You have to be happy. You have to be capable of giving out what you need to give out to the people around you. And if you're unhappy, then you're going to be giving subpar care. Happiness is something that is aligned with peace. If you are not full of peace, if you are not in a peaceful environment, then there's no way that you'll be able to experience happiness, joy. So chase peace, chase happiness, chase you. Give you everything that you need first. And if you have anything left over for anyone after, then you can give it to them. But beforehand, I don't recommend. Obviously, these 10 truths are things that stand true to me. This podcast episode was tailored to be able to open up your minds to different types of thinking in regards to how you feel about yourself and things that will help you grow. And obviously this list looks different for everybody. If you don't necessarily align with any of the 10 that I talked about, that's okay. You can make your own 10 and you can make them make sense to your life, make them make sense to you holistically. But again, I really do appreciate any and everyone who has listened to the podcast and shared the podcast thus far. I have a lot of very big and very important guests coming for later in the year as well as in the beginning of 2024. And I'm really excited for where this is going to go. Sharing a little bit of more background information with you guys is something that I want to continue to do so you guys can learn who I am. For the ones that have no personal connection to me. But I feel like it's really important that we have tough conversations. As a community, it's something that we don't do enough. So I would implore you to try. And if you can't have these conversations with the people around you, do what I'm doing. Have these conversations with yourself. And if it makes it a little bit more easy to transition into having a conversation with somebody else, do what I'm doing and record it. Listen back to it. Understand what it is that you're saying. Communication is important, but something way more important than communication is comprehension. If you're not communicating in a way that can be understood, all of the communication is pointless. You might as well have not said anything. But with that being said, I really hope that you guys have a fantastic holiday season. Focus on being around your family, being in the present moment, and just set yourself up to be a more improved, a more solid version of yourself. And if you ever get to a point where you may feel like you've slipped and you've made a horrible mistake or whatever the case may be, give yourself some grace, give yourself some forgiveness, give yourself some compassion, because one thing that will always be true is that you are human. So there's that. Y'all have a good one.